Wanderlove, a short story by Vega. Snap, 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 snap. 5, that's right, 5 shots of the same vanilla chai beside a vintage postcard photo book at 5 slightly different angles. I was no trained photographer or anything, but I could rock the phone camera like no one's business. And who cares if 5 iterations was a bit more than is justifiable for a beverage, and the cafe patrons were whispering over their loose-leaf teas and coffee cakes. It was the last shot standing after I purged the 4 rejects to the void that mattered. It was that perfect angle that people saw. The perfect angle happened to be just inches above the height of the table, not enough to capture, say, the title of the book clearly, but enough to catch a glimpse of cinnamon atop a mound of foam cresting the rim of the wide terracotta-colored mug. That would be the star, the foam. All else, the book with its crinkled plastic dust jacket, the matching terracotta saucer, the weathered grain of the oak table beneath, would sit ever so slightly out of focus, leaving only the mug with its foamy plumage isolated, alone, and loving every second of it. Was the subject matter cliché? Sure. But it fit my MO. Local cafes were a must if I traveled anywhere, and a charming atmosphere was always a plus. To be entirely honest, I didn't even like chai. My camera points forward. A brief description that sat below my social media handle and said it all. My followers had never seen me. They had no idea what I looked like. All of my photos consisted of landmarks and nature scenes, monuments and museums, tourist traps and tea houses. As wanderlove, I was well liked, but not famous. Talented, but not boastful. Interesting, yet invisible. I celebrated the places I had been, without feeling the need to document that it was, in fact, I who had been there. As Corrine, I was invisible also. I worked a day job at a breakfast diner in town, and the dinner shift at a restaurant down the road. My life wasn't extraordinary. I served tables. I had few friends. I made ends meet. When I got a little time off, I would drive down to Bend or up to Portland or go camping in the nearby forests. On occasion, I had gone on road trips to Seattle or Salt Lake, even one time to LA. I didn't spend too much time in the apartment with Isabel, who much preferred the characters in books to real people. Instead, I liked to walk around downtown, snapping pictures of flower beds and brick walls and faded murals. Today I was doing just that. I walked a brisk pace, wanting to appear to passers-by like I had a destination in mind and was determined to get there. I shot from the hip with my phone. A section of chain-link fence flanked with overgrown weeds and crabgrass, a shop front from across the street, children's books displayed in large box windows, a young couple in athleisure walking their greyhound. I wanted to grab a photo of 6th Street from one end to the other. Standing near the base of the arch reading Redmond established 1910, looking south, I stretched my arms out far in front of me, angling to capture the young trees aligned uniformly along the right of the sidewalk, the staggered brick buildings just opposite, and a handwritten chalk floor sign announcing the day's coffee specials. "Would you like me to take your picture?" A girl, who didn't look much older than me, had come up on my left, touching my shoulder gently so as not to startle me. But startled I was. So much so that I lost grip on my phone, and it landed flat, face up on the pavers, with a clack. "Oh, crap, I am so sorry," the girl said, stooping to pick up my device as I did. "Is it cracked?" "Don't worry about it," I laughed shakily. My heart thrummed with the aftermath of the scare and the anticipation of small talk. I lifted my phone to find it more or less uninjured, only a few dings around the corners of its silicone case. "Did you still want your picture taken?" she said. "You look like you were struggling with it." "Oh, no, I was actually just taking a picture of the street." I motioned vaguely to my right, as if needing to demonstrate what I meant by street, and wondered miserably when this would end. "Oh, my bad. I thought you were taking a selfie." She was turning as she spoke, ready to take her leave. I was grateful. "I'm sorry again for scaring you." "That's okay." With that, she continued on her way. So seamless the transition was, it seemed as though she'd never stopped. I wondered how she felt about the interaction as a whole. Was she embarrassed by the misunderstanding? Did she find it weird that I was taking random photographs by myself? Did she wish I'd been more conversational? Or had she already moved on, as I should? I didn't normally feel out of place with an audience. Then again, I wasn't normally made to converse with that audience either. Perhaps I often considered people around me to be part of the scenery, moving subjects to make the world in my pictures look lived in, alive. Seldom did I consider them having thoughts and judgments of their own. No, those were reserved for the audience behind their phones, who saw the final product and not the process, and whose reactions were limited to shorthand comments and emojis that didn't need to be received in real time, in person, where I would be obliged to react back. The incident with the girl on 6th had broken the illusion, and I decided that I was done for the day. I worked that evening, and came home to an unlit apartment, save for the glow beneath Isabel's closed bedroom door, and the deafened sound of music through the wall. Not unusual. Isabel kept mostly to herself at night, though I could never tell if that was out of her preference or mine. I always came home exhausted, smelling of food. I kicked off my grime-crusted non-slip sneakers before stepping inside, picking them up and dropping them onto the little beige rug by the door, then yanking my own t-shirt off gracelessly and tossing it down the hallway where our laundry closet was. Now shirtless, I found myself flopping backwards onto the couch, ready to post my quarry from earlier in the day. On my phone were 5 new voicemail messages, all of which I could be certain were left by my mom over the course of the last few months. Now was as good a time as any for some spring cleaning. "Hi, Corey. I'm just checking to see how you're doing. Things are good over here. It's hotter than balls, but who's surprised? Oh, and your sister just got promoted." Tap. "Message deleted," the disembodied voicemail lady sing-songed. "New message." Tap. "Message deleted." And so on. Such was a ritual of sorts. Originally, I had been dodging calls from just about everyone back home. My mom, my siblings, even a couple aunts. They had all felt on some level betrayed by my decision to move away, and they each, in their own way, needed to let me know. Early on, the classic guilt trip was a frequent tactic. I would find myself deleting such messages as, "You have no idea what you're doing to Mom. She's a mess." And, "We celebrated your birthday today, without you. Not like you care." And, "Hope you're having a good time finding yourself. Must be nice." I never brought myself to respond. Even after they'd mellowed out and found their peace with me, I could never find the correct timing, could never make it through that narrow window before it was already closed. Time passed, and my mom was the only person who kept trying. It had started with tearful monologues about where she went wrong with me, then angrier ones about how I ended up just like my father. Then came humble pleas to come back for a visit, perhaps attend church with her. "It's great therapy," she'd said, "knowing you are wholly and unconditionally loved." These days, it was the occasional update, simple, unadorned. "Your brother graduated high school. Your sister's dating a software developer. I've taken up macrame. We miss you." Once in a while, I'd listen the entire message through before deleting, wondering if I would ever be forgiven for missing so much and never saying a word. Wondering if I even cared to be forgiven. Dad left when I was 8-ish. From what I understood at that age and what was told to me, he dipped out of the country to be with his girlfriend in Denmark, who we'd met in an online chat room a year prior. My sister, 10 years my senior, was already out of the house by then, living with a boyfriend and some roommates. My brother was too young to remember. In the aftermath of his departure, one of my mom's sisters moved in to help take care of us. Everything I know about my parents' rocky marriage I learned from their trash talk over wine coolers, or from my mom's fits of sobbing as she crumpled at the breakfast table and squeezed my tiny hand a bit too hard. Dad never wrote to us, never called. He sent birthday and Christmas gifts, always with a photo enclosed showcasing his colorful new life in Copenhagen. That lasted for a few years, and then he called it good. I tore up each of the photos he'd sent me. I never heard his side of the story. He didn't give us the chance. Aunt Gina told me once, it takes a special kind of coward to abandon their wife and children. A special, selfish kind of coward. "Oh, stop it, Gina," Mom had snapped in a rare moment of clarity. "She's too young for that. I don't want her growing up hating her father." I already hate him, I'd said. Back then, she had called me her angel. Get up and shower, loser. Isabel's voice faded in as I slowly gained consciousness. I don't want to get there as we're losing daylight. My eyes opened to a too bright living room, and me still reeking in my bra and black denim shorts and ankle socks. I groaned as she began throwing clean clothes at me. A light blue tank top landed on my face. I'm not kidding. Ben's going to be here any minute to drop off the camper and the shrooms. I pushed myself up off the couch slowly, a small mountain of laundry tumbling off of me and onto the floor. Today, Isabel and I were overnighting just north along the Deschutes River. There, we would sleep in her brother Ben's teardrop camper and come back the next morning, perhaps after an early hike. After a bit more coaxing, and under the threat of bodily harm, I threw together a small pack with a change of clothes, plenty of snacks and water and some toiletries, then jumped in the shower. The drive up was short, but idyllic. Farmland and pastures mostly, before we cut west into more wild terrain. We listened to a playlist of indie folk music that had me lost in a wistful daydream of rural Americana. We found amid the dispersed campsites a quiet spot right up against the river. It was warm this time of year, and Isabel and I were absolutely sweating by the time we got a blanket down and a lunch of PB&J sandwiches and potato chips spread before us. We were largely silent as we ate. It was one of the things I appreciated most about Isabel. As a roommate, she gave me my space, did her own thing, and didn't pursue unsolicited conversation. When we did spend time together like this, I felt no pressure to be anything other than there and alive and breathing. I hope she felt the same. Back at the apartment, her brother had given us the shrooms ground up into a sort of powder in little plastic baggies, which we now dumped into matching thermoses of orange juice and shook like bartenders. Once we were satisfied and had gathered our courage, we clinked our thermoses together and, plugging our noses, chugged. The taste wasn't as bad as the texture was, little chunks swimming past our teeth as we gulped the mixture down. My eyes watered as I fought the urge to gag. More than once I had to stop and recompose myself. After much laughing and choking and crying, we had triumphed, and in lieu of celebration, we sat staring at the moving water. I didn't know how much time had passed before a flush had overtaken my feet and was crawling up my calves. I began to fidget manically to try and shake it free. I wiggled my toes, kicked my feet, rocked forwards and backwards. My stomach began to turn. I wanted to pull out my phone as a distraction from the discomfort, to point my camera around for a good shot, but the concept was noticeably lost on me. I found the black mirror of its deactivated screen frightening, and the moment I saw my own reflection, I recoiled. I opted instead to look around and enjoy the view. The light of the afternoon had made everything striking and magical. I admired the dirt and gravel, imagining the satisfying crunch of it beneath my hiking boots. I pictured myself tiny, exploring the dense forest of grass and braving swampy mud puddles with a safari hat and machete. The longer I stared, the more artificial the ground became, too sharp and in focus, like a version of itself in claymation. "Whoa," I said. "The river," Isabel said beside me. Her tone was reverent and dreamlike. I followed the line of her gaze to find the water moving strangely, wriggling like a living thing, and tiny sparks bouncing along its surface where the sun's rays hit it just right through the punctured canopy of nearby junipers. I felt present and happy and whole. It surprised us when darkness began to fall over the campsite. We were light years from Earth, where time moved differently and hours passed in minutes, and we could barely feel the chill of the evening wind that had set the trees alight in song and dance. "I'm going to read in the camper until I fall asleep," Isabel said. "Don't stay out long." "I won't," I replied. She rose carefully and stumbled away, and I wrapped the edges of the blanket around myself. A deep sadness washed over me then, as if in response to the sudden absence of sunlight and company. My intestines were screaming by now. It wasn't long before I was gripped with a sense of fear, but what I was afraid of I couldn't tell. It was incoherent, the fear. It was broad and overarching. Shadows darted between bushes in the distance. Vague forms appeared and vanished, and I sat frozen as invisible walls pulsed around me, just at the edges of my vision. I was visited by my father. His features were as I remembered them. He was unbelievably tall, clean-shaven, with the hint of a cleft in the center of his chin. His hair was cropped short and combed neatly to one side. He wore a pair of narrow, metal-framed glasses and a smile that was large and in charge, deeply creasing the corners of his eyes with unspoken joy. He waved in his khaki pants and gray-striped button-up, and I watched. "I'm sorry," he said, growing solemn. "I didn't make the right choices, but I didn't know how to fix them." "You didn't even try," I didn't say. I wasn't talking to him anyway, not really. And that aside, it didn't seem fair. I was past feeling angry at anyone. "Yeah, me neither," I whispered instead. And with that, he was gone. When I could move once more, I lifted my phone and snapped a shot of the string lights that glittered along the edges of the camper, plugged into the outlet in the center console of the truck. I would shut those off and join Isabel soon. But for now, I let a shroud of melancholy envelop me, knowing that peace lay on the other side. "You have a good experience yesterday?" Isabel asked me in the morning, mouth full of banana. "Yeah," I laughed. "Cathartic. You?" "So weird, but good." On the drive back, my phone rang, and we both stiffened. I looked down at the call ID. "Your mom?" Isabel asked. "Yeah." It was breathy, barely more a word than it was an exhale. I touched the volume on my phone instinctively to mute the ringing without declining the call. I always let it ring. I felt less guilty, like I could simply pretend I had been busy, not actively ghosting. It seemed like ages before the call went to voicemail. "You okay?" Isabel asked after some time. I must have worried her the way I was staring silently into my lap. "I wanted to answer it," I said. I was half panicked, pressed by an unfamiliar sense of urgency. "Should I call her back?" "Go easy on yourself, girl," Isabel chided. "Maybe just send her a text when you're ready." "Yeah," I said, willing my breathing to slow. "Yeah, okay." I stared at my phone for the duration of the ride, and longer. It was sunset once more, with Isabel in her room, and myself sitting crisscross on the couch, before I started typing anything. "Hey, Mom. I'm doing well. Happy to hear all the news from back home." I didn't say, "I miss you guys," because I didn't. Or at least I didn't know if I did. My life was easier out here, away from them and unseen. I was obliged to no one, judged by no one, accountable for nothing. I was not expected to be one thing or another. I could broadcast my soul in photographs to the world and never let scrutiny pass my door. As soon as I hit send, the response was almost immediate. An enthusiastic "Corey!" followed by a more subdued "I'm so glad to hear from you." There was more that followed. "We don't have to catch up all at once. I love you. I'm sorry. I've seen your pictures, but not all of them because I don't have an account. They're beautiful, Corey. I want to understand. When you're ready to talk, I just want to listen." I wasn't ready to talk, but it was nice all the same to receive the invitation. No one called me Corey out here either, which I'd always considered a plus. And though I had expected to shudder at the sight of the nickname so long after I'd left it behind, seeing it now felt as simple and familiar as coming home. Today my camera pointed not forward, but up into the trees, as the late afternoon sun shone sleepily through the darkened leaves that had just begun to turn with the season. I could drop a pastel filter on it, caption it, "Colors Finally Changing." I was lying flat on my back in the grass, the tiny blades scratchy and cool against my neck. I held my phone out directly above my head to capture 6 or 7 shots of the tree in question, and the thought occurred to me that I could so easily tap the icon to turn the camera around, grab a shot of my own self sprawled out in the park. Could I? Should I? In the moment, it seemed the most natural thing in the world to do. And yet a force beyond what felt natural gave me pause. Indeed, had given me pause for years. It was my MO. My camera points forward. But why was it? I had indulged in not one selfie, had not had my picture taken by friend or stranger since I left my life and family across state lines. But today was finally the day. I would switch to the front camera and tap the little circle to take the photo, just one. I wouldn't take several versions, no extras to delete one by one until I found the best. And I would not play with the angles or get my good side or make any adjustments to my blouse. I would rip the bandage off, see if I liked what was underneath, and nothing more. With a familiar snap, the deed was done. I didn't post it, not immediately. It was enough for now that I had taken it and ignored the little trash icon despite having hovered briefly with my thumb. I studied my features, from the flyaway hairs around my temples and ears that rebelled against the tight pull of my absent-minded ponytail, to the crescent-shaped scar that sat barely visible now along the left side of my jaw, the remnants of a childhood fall that made for small talk and not much else. I studied the little imperfections and asymmetries of my likeness, and after some time I was able to glimpse the details below the surface as well, those that tried all the more to remain hidden. And I cried. It was a long, hearty cry, filled with ancient feelings untouched, like the first rain coming down from a particularly sweltering summer, when the highs were pushing 100 and the clouds were swollen, bursting with the weight of all they'd held inside. And before I knew it, the sharp, stinging tears had begun eroding layers I hadn't even realized I'd been building, and what lay beneath might be at once beautiful and terrifying. But there was no stopping its debut, not now. I cried with all the relief of a girl who had been seen, if only by herself, for the first time.